The Blazor controls in Syncfusion are pretty impressive. In this video, we're going to be looking at the DataGrid, charts, a Kanban-style board, a dashboard, autocomplete text boxes, context menus, signature pads, menu bars, toast messages, and more. There's so many controls to look at. In fact, we're going to purposefully ignore the Office file creation and display controls as well as reporting. That way, we can spend more time on the other controls today and then focus in on Office files in another video, and the reporting will actually take 2 different videos dedicated to it to show you. So lots of stuff to show you. Now, this video has been sponsored by Syncfusion. I cover the details of the sponsorship in the intro to Syncfusion video, as well as how to get the Syncfusion controls for free. I encourage you to check out that video. If you haven't yet downloaded the controls, or if you want more information about Syncfusion, I'd appreciate it if you use the link in the description. That will let Syncfusion know that people are interested in their products because of this sponsorship, which will encourage them to continue sponsoring community content. All right, let's jump right into the code. Now, we're going to start with Visual Studio, but I do have the Syncfusion controls installed, which does give me some additional features. So let's create a new project. And in this list, but also over here in my recent use, because I've done it recently, is the Syncfusion Blazor Template Studio. Now, if you notice, you type Syncfusion here, you'll notice that there's a lot of different controls. So there's ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET MVC, which, by the way, that's not .NET Core. That's the original ASP.NET, the .NET Framework version. This is the .NET Core version. There's Blazor Template Studio. There's Windows Form application and WPF application. These get installed by default when you install the complete Syncfusion package. So I'm going to choose the Syncfusion Blazor Template Studio. I really love this particular template. Now, I don't necessarily use this for production, but this is a great one to create your practice projects with and your demos with. And the reason why is because it's going to build for us demos of the various things we need. Then we can create our own project and just use the code that we played around with already. It encourages that idea of practice. And if you know me at all, you know that I really focus in on practice, because until you build something yourself, you won't understand the intricacies of actually using it. You may think you know it until you actually go use it and you find that something breaks. This way you can actually get your hands dirty, get working on the template studio to try things out before you put it into a real project. So let's create a template studio today. And we're going to call this Syncfusion Blazor Template Demo. And we'll call it Demo App. And I guess the temp directory is fine. We're going to hit create. I will give you this code if you want to try it out, but really it's just the template studio. Now, here I have my first set of options. Do I want Blazor Server or Blazor WebAssembly? Now, we're going to choose Blazor Server because of the fact that all things Blazor Server can do that are both client-side and server-side, whereas WebAssembly only does client-side stuff, but you can choose either. Next up, you'll notice that yes, HTTPS is configured. It is .NET 6, but you can choose other versions. And then there's theme. Now, this is where some confusion might come in. And you may say, oh, this is using Fluent. Well, no, it's still using Bootstrap because the Blazor uses Bootstrap 5. So will Syncfusion. However, you can style your web app any way you want. Do you want to style it in the Fluent style or in the Bootstrap 5 style or Tailwind style and so on? That doesn't mean you're going to get Tailwind installed if you choose Tailwind. It's just the styling that comes with Tailwind by default. So we're going to choose Bootstrap 5 just to be consistent with what we already have installed. But again, it does not matter what you choose here. You're still using Bootstrap for the actual UI framework for the web, just to be clear there. And then we're not going to choose authentication. Hit next. And this is where we get a list of controls. And this is how we can set up demos for the various things we want to look at. So we're going to choose a few of these. So we're going to choose DataGrid. Let's choose chart. Now, I'm not going to choose all of these because that'd be overwhelming, and you can explore all of these yourself if you want. So DataGrid and chart, and then let's come down here and we're going to choose, we could do a barcode generator. That's kind of cool, but you can see it yourself. There's a Kanban board. This shows you things like drag and drop. I want to show you that. So we're going to go there. Rich text editor. We're going to try that out as well. That allows you to create what's called Wysiwyg, which is what you see is what you get when you type out your text. So you can do things like bold words and highlight words and have bullet lists and so on in a text editor on the web. Pretty cool stuff. We're going to skip the PDF viewer and word processor because of the fact we're going to come back to those later, like I said. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here we could choose. We're going to choose just a date time picker as opposed to all these different types of date and time range. Well, let's do the range one. Well, just so you can see the range, and that's pretty cool. Autocomplete. Let's also select Dialog. I'm going to give you a caveat here, though. We're going to show you Dialog, but I'm not a huge fan of Dialog. Not because it's a Syncfusion problem, but because of the fact that it's not terribly friendly to all devices. So for instance, if you're on mobile, it's not a great experience. It still can work, but it's not a great experience. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the same time, especially if you're using Blazor WebAssembly and creating a progressive web application, one that installs a desktop application, well, then the Dialog makes sense in a lot of ways. So there's room for using it, but it's just not in every application should have a Dialog kind of thing. All right. We're also going to look at the dashboard layout. That's another drag and drop option here. We're going to look at, let's keep looking down here. Let's do the color picker just so we have one. File upload. There's some cool stuff you can do there with drag and drop, but you can do the same thing with Blazor. So we're going to skip that for now. Signature is in preview, but I do want to show that off. Context menu and menu bar will show the difference between those two things. Context menu is when you right click on something, and menu bar is just the bar at the top that you drop down. All right. And we could do sidebar. I think we can ignore that. File manager, same thing. Breadcrumbs. Let's do chips. Progress button. Those are pretty interesting. Toasts. This is the better way, in my opinion, for web projects to show some type of pop-up as opposed to that dialog box. This is a better way, in my opinion, to show off those kind of things that makes sense. And let's grab a spinner as well, just so we have that. So again, we're going to ignore Excel, PDF, Word, and PowerPoint. We'll come back to those in another video. So what this has done is we've said, these are things we want to see samples of. So those are controls. We can hit next, and we could do some configuration, but by default, everything's turned on. We're going to leave that as a default and then just move on. So you could change it to say, I don't want to see paging for DataGrid. I just want to see grouping or whatever. We hit next. So here's kind of a wrap up of our configuration where we've got .NET 6, Bootstrap 5 theme. Again, that's just the style, not the changing from Bootstrap to Tailwind or something else. That's just the look of it. No authentication, yes to HTTPS, and we're not going to include localization here, but that would allow you to localize the controls for various languages and cultures. So some cool stuff there as well, but we're not going to get into that today. We've got enough to cover in this video. Let's hit create. This will take a little bit first to create the project, but then it's going to have to download a lot of controls to make sure that they're installed using different NuGet packages. So just note that even as it kind of locked up a little bit here, no problem, just wait for it. It's doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get this whole demo set up for us. Okay, so the demo is set up mostly, and you'll notice over here in the bottom, there is background tasks going on, low priority background tasks. that can run to get more things like the NuGet packages installed. This does show us an overview of what's going on, some more learning resources and so on. We can close that out, as well as the starter page from Blazor itself. And then if we open up pages, there's a lot of pages in here. Even more if you chose more options, because there's a page per option you've chosen. Now, if we hit build, let's make sure this thing builds first, because this may involve, again, downloading NuGet packages. If we go to dependencies and look at the NuGet packages, we'll see there's a lot of NuGet packages installed. And again, don't get caught off guard by this. Yes, there's a lot of NuGet packages installed. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. And here's why. We could have installed just Syncfusion.blazor, which would install 70 plus controls in one NuGet package. It makes you feel good that you have one NuGet package, but the reality is you're still installing all the same stuff. But by having different NuGet packages, if you don't need, let's say, for instance, the calendar, well, then you could uninstall that NuGet package or not install it in the first place, and then you don't have that extra code in your project. So just note that there's a lot of stuff in here, but that doesn't mean that it's excessive. In fact, what they've done is they've taken one big thing and broke it down into parts and are only giving you the parts that you need. There's actually more parts that we could have installed that aren't installed, but because of the fact that we don't need them, they're not installed. All right, so it's a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, because of the fact that of what's installed right now, if you go and look at the packages, also another way of looking at the packages, just going to your project, notice that they are version 20.1.0.52. This is the latest cutting edge version, but it's not the main branch version. It's actually ahead of that. So the kind of the official release, the one that's the one we should be using, is actually .47. And this is going to cause a little bit of a problem in the future where we have to roll back to version 47. Just note that you can look on the Syncfusion site and see what's the version number that I really need. Since these are NuGet packages, you can roll them back very easily. In fact, because they're just 52 and I know it's 47, I can do a Control H here and replace 52 with 47 in this document only. Replace all those, 15 changes. So now all these have been changed with the new version. Now I hit save, and that's going to restore the NuGet packages. And if we go back to dependencies and say manage NuGet packages, you'll notice they're all version 20.1.0.47. They could be upgraded, but I know that's the latest main version. There's new versions after that, but they're minor versions. They're supposed to be just for bug fixes and tweaks, but I have found some changes that cause some problems on my machine with the fact that I have the preview version of .NET 7 installed. And that caused some issues in .52. I found that the main version, .47, works just fine. So you could leave yours at 52 and see if it works just fine. Just note that on my computer, because of the fact that I have some pre-release stuff installed, including the .NET 7 preview bits, that caused some problems with the .52 release. So you may have learned something new already. You just change your project file, the version, and it just updates NuGet. So really helpful stuff there. Okay, let's just hit build. That's going to build our entire application and launch it. All right, now it's launching, supposedly. There we go. It's off the other screen. So it went on and off very quickly, but there was a message up here, a red message that said, hey, you're using the version that's not yet licensed. Now I have a license for this. It's just that I need to install it in this web project in order to say, yes, I am licensed for this. And we'll cover that in the future. But for right now, don't worry about the licensing. It will still run. It's in a unlicensed state, which is fine for demos. Okay. Now we have over here it collapses and opens back up. Not a huge fan, but whatever. This is a list of all the controls that we said we want a demo of. You can also get them from the main page just by looking through this list. So let's start walking through these demos. Again, these are demos on my computer that I've created based upon that template studio. So let's start with DataGrid. And the DataGrid, it looks a lot like what we saw in the online demo, although it isn't as pretty. Remember I said in the previous video, the intro to Syncfusion, that the demo's purpose is to be a sales tool, not just to show off the code. Well, this is just showing off the code. It's not as much a sales tool, so it's not as pretty or flashy, but it still has all the things that we're used to here. So let's look at what it does. We have the filtering, or I'm sorry, the sorting. We can do filtering. So we say, let's only look for bolded. And there you go. There's just the bolded. And we can clear that out. And now it's all of them. Notice we have the paging here. We have, again, sorting by order date, country. We can also drag this up to the top, and now we're grouped by country. So there's the various countries and what's inside them. And we can cancel that and have all of them now. And we can say, you know what? And this is where, again, we'll get into more of this in a future video, but there's this really cool button here. We can say Excel export. If we do that, I'll open this up, wait for Excel to open. Here is the Excel file of those 75 records, as well as in the order we had them in. So actually, I'm not sure it does. Nope, it didn't order them. It sometimes orders them the right way. Other times, I think it just, oh no, it does. Watch, we're on page 1. There we go. So yes, it does. So we've got USA first, there's USA, $2.10, $2.10. So it has ordered them based upon whatever I selected. So the stuff I do on this grid, when I export it, it shows up that way in Excel. So even that is some pretty cool stuff. And if we go back and look, let's close this out and go over, close, I'm just moving it over. Let's go over here to our pages, and this is the DataGrid features page. We can see exactly what's going on with our setup. So there is some styling. Again, not a huge fan of doing it this way. Not a huge fan of the breaks and how they're using the HTML either, but that's okay. This is a demo. We can get the things we need out of it. And then down here, here's some code. There is some generation of just random data, as well as what's going to happen when we export the data. That's just Excel export. That's what it does. And that's just part of the grid. So here's the grid. Here's how you lay it out. It's called SF grid. We have the data source, which is just from our code down here. That's just a list of order. And then we've specified the grid columns. If it's a primary key, validation rules, edit types, and so on. So there's great demos here for you to say, okay, I want to do this or I want to do that. Now you can cut this way down because they're doing everything on this demo. You probably don't want everything, but by seeing everything, you can say, okay, these are the things I do want. And then you can play around the other things you might or might not want. So this is a great way to try something out, see how it works, see what you want, and then put it into your own application after you have practiced with it. Try different things. Maybe turn off this whole bar here, turn off the column grouping, or turn off the filtering or sorting. Try different things, try different page sizes and so on, just to see how it might look and figure out what you like and how you want your grid to work before you put it into a real application. This gives you, again, that practice. So that's just the grid. Let's keep going because I'm going to give you a high-level overview of these various tools and how to work with them, but we're not going to get into the actual coding of it because of just how much there is. Rich text editor. This is pretty cool stuff. So if we say, you know what, I want this to be bold, no problem. There, it's bold. You know what, that font is way too small. Let's make it 24. Done. This is a rich text editor. This is right inside of our Blazor page. We can create a really nice UI for seeing this editor. And if we go to the code of it, which that shrunk it down way too small, but you can see this actually, there we go. If we could zoom in here, it actually writes HTML, which is what most Wysiwyg editors do, is they write HTML for styling this stuff on the web. So it's a pretty common thing to do, but let's not do that. Let's do this, reset, there we go. Well, now I'm outside my page. Awesome. Now we can go to another page and get back to it. But by doing this, you allow your visitors, your viewers, to be able to create a stylized design while not hurting anything, okay? So you can use Markdown. You can also use HTML. So cool stuff there. You can do, you can show things like character count. You can enable resizing of this. You can move it around and so on. So some great stuff there. Date range picker. This is a fun one. So they have a date picker and it works pretty cool, but then there's date range. So if you say, you know what, I want to go from the 10th to June 12th. Kind of like if you're, fly on an airline, you say, I want to fly out this date and come back this date. Or if you were staying at a hotel and say, I want to check in this day and check out this day. That's the kind of control you can use in certain circumstances. Well, there you go. You can apply. There's that range now. You can also say have different quick links like this month or this week, or again, that custom range to pick whatever you want. And there you go. So date range picker. There's also a date time picker. I thought that was a pretty interesting approach to this problem. And that is, we have the concept in C# of date time. Now we also have the date and the time objects, but date time has been around forever and it's the one we commonly use. So what if we do want to choose both a date and a time? How do you do that with a dropdown? Well, you put two icons here. Let's pick the date first. And they've locked into a certain date range in 2020, whatever. But notice it chose 6 p.m., but I can go over here and say, I actually want 8:30 a.m. So date and time picker. So there's the time, there's a date. Pretty interesting implementation, I thought. Autocomplete. So if you want to give the user the option to type something in, but you also want to kind of guide them in possibilities, well, we could type in ball and notice how it filters down to all things that have ball in the name. American football, basketball, and football. So you choose the one that most interests you, and there you go. You can also, if you're typing ball, notice you can hit the down arrow and hit enter, and it chooses it for you. So some pretty cool interaction there. Again, it just makes your user experience better on the web, where if you have certain things they can choose from, especially from a dynamic list, instead of giving them a drop down, you can let them filter based upon just ball, or let them select from one of the possible options that you have in the list. Dialog. Again, this is one that before I show you on, make sure that we're on the same page. This is not a common thing you should do on the web. This is more for your progressive web applications, but even then, I'm not necessarily a huge fan. It's a limited circumstance thing. Don't go crazy with this. But there is a possibility of having a dialog. So you click open, and there's a dialog. You can move it around. You can have a scroll bar inside. You can have buttons inside. You can resize it. You can close it out. You can also click the Learn More button and have it do other things. So this dialog right here, the purpose of a dialog is to take the focus of a window and say, no, you have to focus on me. You have to deal with me before progressing. So in a desktop application, that makes a lot of sense. You can say, hey, are you sure? And have a yes or no. And You don't allow them to do anything else until they say, yes, I'm sure I want to delete these files, or no, I didn't want to delete those files. But in the web, it's not as great of an experience in most cases. However, when you have that need, here you go. Done. Okay, so there's the dialog. Dashboard layout. This is kind of fun. Notice all the panels, they're numbered. Well, we can add a panel if you want, but let's leave these panels as we are. Let's say panel 6, I want 6 and 7 on the other side of panel 3. I can drag 6 over here. I can drag 7 below it, and there we go. I can say, actually, I want panel 3 and 5 to switch places. There we go. I've now switched them around. So some cool stuff there. You can also say, let's resize. Let's say panel 2 is too big, which I can't see it, actually. Bummer. So let's move this over for now. Let's resize panel 2, and let's bring it back down like this. So now we've kind of rearranged this page and said, let's bring us down and so on. Now you need to add a scroll bar here so you can scroll down and see the bottoms of these things. Otherwise, you come into this problem where you can't see what's going on underneath, and so you can't change things around. But yeah, there is a dashboard layout. You can have different things in each panel. You can have them closed or open. You can have them resized. You can allow the user to figure out what layout works best for them. So this can be a really powerful feature if you want to create a dashboard, where maybe you have reporting on it, maybe you have various bits in the different windows, and you allow the user to say, this is what's most important to me, this layout. So there you go, dashboard layout. Color picker. You want a specific color? Cool. Let's look over here. Let's go into the red range and say, I want that color. Also notice the hex and the RGBA. Hit apply. There you go. There's that color. We can also change to say 50 on that. Notice it's halfway transparent. That's what the A in RGBA stands for, is the ability to make it transparent, or how transparent it is, with 100% being no transparency, 0 being you don't see anything. So there's a color picker you can add to your site. You can also notice down here there's the standard colors you could pick from and say that's what I want. Signature. This is a in preview one. It's still being worked on, but let's just say you want to add the ability to allow someone to sign for something on your site. Well, there you go. So now, is that a great signature? No. Is it my signature? No. So don't worry, I'm not giving you my signature, what it might look like, but you can make your mark on the web using a signature tool in Blazor. And again, not that hard to do. If we go back over here to our Solution Explorer and look for signature feature. So there's the control right there. And that's it. That's all there is to it, is that control right there. We give you a size with a height and width. Again, if you're doing this in real life, you wouldn't be putting these things out. You'd probably use your CSS to style where it fits in the page, but for a demo, that works just fine. So pretty simple stuff, and yet something really, really powerful. Context menu. If we right click, or notice touch hold. So if we touch and hold, if we're on a mobile device, or if we right click, we get this menu. This menu is not the common menu we get with a website. Normally we get something like this, which is hit back or refresh, save the page, which doesn't really work. Print, not great, but in here we can control our own menu and have our own actions on a list. So you can say things like, hey, send this to accounting, or whatever you want to do with this data based upon the context of where you're at. Again, this is the concept of bringing more and more things to Blazor that make it more and more desktop-like, even though it's on the web. This is great both for Blazor server, where we have 1 foot in the server and 1 foot in the client side, because it allows us to be more like a single page application, more like a desktop application, but also for Blazor WebAssembly, where we are fully in the client and we are potentially even working offline. This can be a really great feature because it makes our single page application into when we do a progressive web application, it looks like and acts like a full desktop application, even though the reality is it's a web application behind the scenes. So some really cool stuff there. Menu bar. So you want to have that concept of a bar at the top where you have, again, just like a desktop app would, you have different things with drop downs and buttons and so on. You can do that with the menu bar control. These, I think, are just fun. And the reason I put this on here is because I thought it was just a whole lot of fun to see. And I think that this is something you should at least check out. With the web, one of the things that we do more of is wait, because of the fact that it's not just instantaneous. We're talking across the world sometimes. We are waiting for things to process and so on. So the concept of telling the user, giving them some kind of feedback to say, hey, we're doing something, hang on, is pretty important. Because you want to let the user know what's going on so they don't become impatient and, let's say, click a button repeatedly, hoping to get to actually work. When in fact it is working, it's just not done working. So we have the option in Syncfusion to have spinners in our button. So let's say spin right, left, top, and bottom is where it puts the spinner in the button. So let's just say spin right. Click that, notice the spinner to the right, and then it goes away. So you can control how long that spinner lasts for. So obviously as you're working, you keep that spinner rolling, and then when it's done, it goes away. But there's also some fun things here. For example, download. Notice a little line right there. It's pretty subtle, but there's a line there that's telling you, yes, we're working. Or zoomed out, notice it replaces the whole thing with a spinner and a progress filler. It's a little hard to see. Let's zoom in here so we can get a better view of this. Notice it filling up. Or zoom in, same thing, but it's the way the words leave. Notice it zooms past them to the spinner. But then I think my favorite is slide right. Like that. That's pretty cool. I like that user experience. It just feels fun and interesting, and yet not crazy stuff. It's not going all over the page. It's subtle. It's just subtle, but at the same time, it makes for a nice interactive experience. So there's some cool stuff here you can do if you want to try different ways of doing this. But again, my preference is that slide right, where it slides the words right, and then that spinner is there, but it also fills up the box, again, based upon what you're doing and how long you want that to run. So some cool stuff there with progress buttons. Again, that's just my favorite fun little thing. Chips are these ideas of they're button-like things that can either be just static, like these are. They're just there. There's little indicators for various things, like maybe you have a person's resume and you kind of tag on there, oh, they worked at Microsoft, they worked at Google, and so on. Or you can have little things like this where notice, let's zoom in again. Notice how there's actually a little image here and a word or a name and X. Well, if you hit the X, it goes away. So you can interact with these little things. Also, you can have check marks on them. You can have, they can change colors. Let's go down to the next one. Change colors as you click on them. So some fun stuff there as well. So with that, those are just nice little subtle things you can put in your site or your application to make it better looking, make it pop out a little bit more than just a plain black and white. Again, let's reset the view here. Let's go on to Toast. This is, if you're going to have to pop something up to show the user, it's not the same as a dialog. It does not take preference. It does not take away the focus of the page. But this is the more web-friendly way of doing a type of pop-up, and that is toast. So you show toast, notice how little message over here, I can mouse over it and it keeps it there. If I mouse away from it, notice that the timer for going away. But I can also manually close this like so. I can show multiple at the same time, but I can also say hide all, and I'll go away. But a toast like this allows us to be able to interact with and see various things like I've got a meeting coming up, or hey, you got 5 minutes left in this, or whatever the case may be for showing the user external information they need to see that might not be right in their flow of what they're doing, but they need to be able to see and possibly interact with. So this allows you to do both those things, and you can put other things in here like buttons. So toast is a great option there. And finally, let's look at spinner. Spinner, we can choose different types, and we can show that. It shows it right in the middle of the text, which I'm not really a big fan of, but there you go. So there's the material spinner. You can change it to bootstrap spinner, bootstrap 4, fabric, high contrast, and then the regular old bootstrap with the bubbles. So they have different themes for it. You can hide it and show it. But that's a spinner in case you wanted to, again, inform the user, we're doing something, hang out here, just wait. I'd probably put that not on top of text, but I'd probably put that in the text section where the text is coming, but it's not yet available. So think if you're loading data from a database, but you're not there yet, put a spinner up there and say, hey, we're doing something, so it knows, and then you replace the spinner with the actual data. So that's the spinner. Okay, so I've gone through a lot of controls here, showing you what the things that Syncfusion can do with our Blazor Studio. Most of these, if not all of these, can be done in ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET MVC, or in JavaScript, or even the desktop controls. So these things can be done across all these different types of applications and in the same way, meaning they look the same to the end user. Now the code behind will be different, but the actual how they appear to the user will be the same, which gives you a uniform experience across the different types of user interfaces, which is really important. So let's take one final look at the code here. Again, I just want to show off that there's not a lot of stuff here. In program.cs, there is a couple of tweaks here where we'll see, I believe, actually, no, there's no tweaks in here right now. We're going to add a couple of tweaks later for changing this, for adding our own controls. But the way they've done it here is pretty much locked into just these pages. So we have our NuGet packages, which we got a lot of because we have a lot of controls. But on the actual page, you'll see that it shows off the various ways. Remember, chips, we have different styles. Well, this shows up how to do this. And it shows off, here's the code for that, which the code, remember we could close out those chips. Not a lot of code there, okay? So there's some really cool stuff you can do here, but the best thing is you get to see the code in action. You get to see what it does, and then you get to modify it. And that's what I encourage. Modify this, try that out and say, hey, what if I did this instead? And try it, see if it breaks. If it doesn't break, keep working on it until it does break. Keep working on it until you get what you look or you're wanting out of this control and say, yes, this is the control, the end result control I want, but it's still in a demo environment. Now you can take just that control and put it into your actual application. And the only thing you're going to need to make sure of is that you get the right package with it. But the documentation will tell you which package you need for which control. So great stuff there. There's a lot of good stuff in here you can play around with and work. I will say that the Blazor controls are probably the best controls, the best designed, most modern controls they have in Syncfusion. I haven't worked with the Flutter or the JavaScript ones, but the older MVC ones or even the ASP.NET Core ones are a little harder to work with, and they don't have this nice template studio to show you the demos of. So there's a little more work there, but they do have those GitHub resources to help you out. And they do have the forums, they do have FAQs and a lot more things to help you show off what you can do. They also have the demos, which you can see more of on the website itself. So some cool stuff here with Syncfusion controls. There's a lot more to cover. We didn't do even every control because there's 70 plus controls you can do in Blazor, but we did a lot just to show off the various parts. And I'm kind of interested now in which ones are the ones you're like, yes, I need to have that in my project. There are some that when I look at them, I go, yep, I want that feature. So I'm interested in seeing which ones you look at and say, yes, those are the ones I want to see. Let me know down in the comments and let me know which ones you're like, yeah, I want to know more about that. Or I'm interested in how this might work in this scenario. I can't do every video. I can't cover everything because there's just so much to cover, but I would be interested in at least knowing which ones you're thinking about and what hurdles you might be thinking about overcoming with these controls. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for Syncfusion for sponsoring this video. And as always, I am Tim Corey.